We're talking about an agent with a stack of 200 pages in front of them, and they're going through them. And so again, agents extrapolate a lot. And if there's no emotions in the first 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, then I'm going to assume that they're just not going to have any emotions in this story. Because so many authors do not write emotions. They just don't. Releasing your inner dragon.
Hello and welcome to another episode of First Page Reads. So once again, as per last time, we're going to read the first pages that have been sent to us, or read up to where we'd be out enough to kind of judge the story on. And we're going to act as though we are publishing agents. Obviously we're not, but we do have experience in the industry, and then we'll say why we are out at this point or not out.
So I just don't want anyone to get mad.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is show people how rough it is in this industry. So we're going to it's not when we personally are like, oh, I hate this story. Don't take it like that. It's if an agent had this, when do we feel that agent would send you a rejection letter? That's to try to show you how the industry thinks. So this is not about how Drake and Marie think. This is how Drake and Marie think the industry thinks.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and take this puppy off the road.
And we do like doing these. So if you want to have your first page included in our next first page read, where we read the first page and tell you where the agent might stop, send it to releasingyourinnerdragon@gmail.com. Just make sure you put on there 4 first page reads, because we also take edits. And we'll do, when we get enough of these sent to us, we'll do another episode.
Yep. Okay, so here we go. Emily Mason had never known her mother. Now the person who kissed her skinned knees, placed the bandages, and her favorite person in the world wasn't in the world anymore. Fiona Cooper Mason, or to everyone who knew her, Nanny Fee, had passed. The realization materialized and she sank into okay, I'm going to say I'm out.
Yeah.
Because the grammar is not.
I would have been out in the second paragraph. I got what it was after I got past that. But it took me a second to even figure out if an agent has to struggle with the grammar. Remember, this is a buyer's market. They have to spend money and time to correct grammar and all of that. So if you fail in the grammar side of it, then you got to understand they're looking at this as a business. And so that's a lot of money they have to spend to get an editor to come through and fix your poor grammar. They've got 5,000 other options that they can choose from. And so, yeah, this one, I don't think either one of us are out because of the story itself, but the fact that we're now trying to figure out what the author is saying. And and you have to understand, here's the crappy thing about this industry. You might go, yeah, but okay, so I messed that one paragraph up, but I'm flawless everywhere else. The problem is that I don't have time to read the whole thing. I've got to make a decision quickly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume if the second paragraph is very clunky and grammatically difficult to read, the whole thing is going to be that way. It may not be, but I'm never going to stick around to find out. I'm going to send a thank you rejection letter and move on. I've got a stack of these to do.
When you are editing, especially the portion that, when you do a query letter, they tend to ask for like the first 20 pages or something like that, like as part of the query letter. You get a friend to read it. You read it aloud. You make Word read it to you. And you make certain that there are no missing words, that the grammar is as good as you can make it. You feed it through ChatGPT. Do anything with it. Check every line.
Be a part of a writer's group.
Yeah,
like
be a
maybe
part of the
join
writers
our
group.
writer's room and get critiqued by Drake and Marie to kind of say,
Or,
hey, wow, that's
you
that
know,
paragraph.
yeah. But yeah, you've got to get the grammar part of it and the words, because I think there's a word missing here. Yeah, the realization materialized. She sank into the bed, already disheveled. It cradled the full weight of her body, dropping. Like, I don't know, maybe. But there are. It feels like there are missing words here, like,
But it's also very
as well as the
esoteric in kind of the way
grammatical problem.
it's very esoteric in the way it's written.
Hmm?
So like that
Yeah,
second paragraph, now the person who kissed her skin knees placed the bandages on her favorite person in the world. Like we have all these pronouns. Like,
yeah.
so now the person who kissed her skin knee and put bandage on her favorite person. So wait a minute. So the person with the skin knee is the one whose favorite person in the world is
That
placing.
her is pointing at the wrong
Right,
pronoun, because that
right,
her is pointing at the person who kissed her skinned knees, not at the protagonist.
right. Yeah, so the
Yeah,
person is kissing a skin knee and also putting bandages on the person's
yeah.
person. So
So
when you have this kind of stuff, it's like they're going to pass on it. They
yeah,
just are.
absolutely. You,
And that's a shame because then they don't even get into the story itself.
yeah. So it is with the first page. It is so critical that you get it as perfect as you can.
Yeah. It is
Okay.
literally true when they say you only get your opening paragraph when it comes to an agent. Like that's
Yeah.
it. And then the first
They are
paragraph,
cold and hard and quick
yeah, the first
because they're
paragraph
in
will
a hurry.
really it's the first sentence. You get the first sentence, which buys you the first paragraph. And then if they're still reading after the first paragraph, it'll buy you the first, usually the page. And then if they're still reading
Yeah.
after the first page, then that'll buy you a deeper look.
Yeah.
But if they can't get past, if there's anything, if there's a typo in the opening line, that
Mm.
is reason for them to pass on it. And they will.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, they are looking for a reason to reject your book.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Story 2. Samuel Herbert treaded the station's hangar highest platform. The grated metal rattled and groaned with each cautious step. He steadied himself, looking down through the platform's diamond-shaped holes. Half a dozen levels of similar walkways were strung beneath them like multi-layered streets. Instead of automobiles, there were port workers heading to projects and crew on their way to embark. Instead of houses and storefront, there were misshapen chunks of gunmetal grey spacecrafts. Some swarmed with mechanics, while others sat dormant and empty. A vertical gantry plucked one of the ships from its lot and lowered it to a beam at the bottom of the hangar. It passed the ship off to a horizontal crane system where it swung in a queue with other vessels, awaiting its turn to be dropped in the vacuum of space. Yep. Where are you out?
Anywhere you want in that second paragraph.
Yeah.
And here's the shame. Most readers aren't going to be out. Most readers
Yeah.
would give this more.
So the problem with the second paragraph is that it is very long and without any tie back to the protagonists. And I can actually see that right here is the tie back, right? So Samuel's white black case dangled by the strap around his neck, and he's got this image of falling down. Now, if you rearrange that second paragraph to have Samuel experience that moment of vertigo and that thing, and then commit to, not looking and cut, like interject the character in the description. The description needs to be personal to the character.
Yeah, the second paragraph is what's called detached telling. There's
Yeah.
nothing attached. There's no perspective in the second paragraph. We don't really know that Samuel is looking at anything. And when I say that, I don't mean Samuel watched as this and Samuel looked at this. I'm not talking about filtering. But there's no POV in the second one. It's omniscient.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of description. We're at the very beginning of our story. we need to hook, especially agents, we need to hook them as fast as possible. Again, that's why I said it's a shame, because there's nothing in here that would probably stop a reader from reading. So like if this was the look inside and the cover was interesting to me, and somebody had said, hey, you might want to check this book out, I think you'll like it, I would keep reading personally if this was a look inside. If I'm an agent and I've got a stack of 200 submissions that I have to go through today before I start my day, then that second paragraph being omniscient and there's no connection to the POV, I don't feel like it's got a great voice, I don't see a conflict, I'm not connected to the story in any way. What I'm going to do as an agent is assume that many, many, many times through this story, the character or the reader is going to get detached from the story. You know, again, agents assume a lot from that opening. And here's the thing, they're right to do it, because 99.9% of the time when I read somebody's opening page, that is literally how the entire book is read. You know, I used to get pissed off when I would, you know, I've got tons of agents that are friends. We go out to dinner, and like in the beginning of my career, when I found out, oh yeah, I only read the first line and then I reject it. I'm like, how? That's wrong. You're evil. Like that could be the next Harry Potter. And then now 20 years down the road, I'm going, yeah, no, that first line really tells a lot about that author's ability. That first paragraph, that first couple of paragraphs.
I just want to quickly just speak about this type of description, because a lot of people describe like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they describe in what I call pretty prose. Okay, it is pretty prose to read. It's got lovely descriptive words and all the rest of it, but it is completely, like as you said, detached. It might as well be omniscient. What you need to try and do is work into those descriptions how Samuel feels about what he's seeing.
Yeah.
And
Why?
how that ties into his, like, what does he want and
Right.
what is he seeing?
So like we have, instead of automobiles, okay, why is Samuel Herbert expecting to see automobiles here? It sounds like we're
Yep.
out in space.
Yep.
Instead of houses and storefronts, okay, why is he expecting to see them, and why does that affect him?
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of opportunities in here to bring the character in, give me their emotions, and then based on that, there's a lot of opportunities to make me go, oh, this is interesting.
Yep.
Because there is this whatever.
Yep.
It looks like he's got suicidal fantasy next. So if that's a part of this up front, that's probably going to do a better job of hooking
Yep.
than not.
Okay. Oh dear. Oh dear, my girly. Sorry, my cat. My apologies to the author who just got catted. Cat. Story number 3. Theo pretended to be asleep when Dr. Harper entered her room. He was earlier than usual, but the procedure would be the same as always. The doctor ran a hand across her forehead to rouse her before he began checking her vital signs. The bell of the stethoscope was like ice against her neck, and she shivered as he counted her heartbeats. His fingers tapped the thick leather-bound journal tucked under his arm. He slid a tray to her bedside, dry toast, ice water, and a handful of pills. The usual fare. Theo pulled the blankets tighter around her thin shoulders as she made herself eat. Even in summer, her room was cold. There were specks on the walls that had been painted over, divots left from thumbtacks. The walls used to be decorated with posters, Polaroids, and some of her mother's paintings. Strings of decorative fairy lights had once encircled her headboard, but all of that had been removed a long time ago. He said it made it easier to sanitize. Dr. Harper sat down, one long leg crossed over the other. I'm still in, so I'm going to keep reading. Dr. Harper sat down, one long leg crossed over the other, and flipped through the journal. Even though the sun was still a golden glow at the edge of her bedroom window, he was already dressed in a collared shirt and clean white lab coat. Okay, I'm losing a bit of interest. All right. Where were you out?
I mean, honestly, I think an agent would have been out before I raised my hand.
Mm,
Um, there's no emotions. There's no connection to the character. I don't know what the character, what their motivation is, what their desires are. Um, I don't really even know if I'm in a head. I feel like I'm both in Dr. Harper's head and Theo's head. Not straight up head hopping, but
mm,
almost like it's an omniscient, I'm in no head. Because there's no
yeah. The emotion is very subtle and it's very despair orientated. I was out at the paragraph where he said, after Dr. Harper sat down, one leg crossed against the other and flipped through the journal. The reason why I was out there was because I hadn't been, so I was interested in Theo's situation. It was an interesting setup for the story because we're clearly dealing with an invalid. But I needed some reason that makes this invalid at least different enough to keep me reading. That was why I was out.
right. There's just nothing that is connecting me to the character.
Yeah. Like right now, she's in a state of deep depression, I think. At least that's what it reads like.
So, like, there were specks on the wall that had been painted over, divots left from thumbtacks. The wall used to be decorated with posters, Polaroids, and some of her mother's paintings. Like, but there's no emotional attachment to that. Like, how does that make me feel? How am I supposed to
Yeah.
feel about this?
Yeah. What does he said it made it easier to sanitize? What does that make the character feel
Right.
about? Is she angry about it? Does she just accept it? Like
And
there needs to be a little bit more here to pull me through and
right.
continue with me going with the character.
Now, again, I wouldn't necessarily have stopped reading.
Yeah.
And here's the danger of doing something like this. Let's say I'm just gonna
Mm,
I'm just gonna steel man this. Let's say that Theo has no emotions, is literally emotionally dead, and part of the story arc is this character growing and learning what it's like to be human and everything like that. That may be a really, really good story. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about an agent with a stack of 200 pages in front of them and they're going through them. And so again, agents extrapolate a lot. And if there's no emotions in the first 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, then I'm going to assume that they're just not going to have any emotions in this story. Because so many authors do not write emotions. They just don't. One of our watchers said, many first page flashback. I know that's a
no,
no for
yeah,
Marie. To me, it's not a flashback. It's just past perfect. It's just this isn't here anymore.
yeah. It doesn't read like a flashback to me either, but but there's not enough. There's
Right.
not enough character here to pull me through.
Yeah. Grammar's good.
Yeah,
Um,
grammar's good. There's an interesting setup here. It's a different start to a story. All of those are good things. But give me more. Connect me to Theo.
what does Theo want? What does
Yeah.
she desire? What is she feeling? How does she relate to the world around her?
Mm,
Um, these are all things that are going to connect me deeper into that character. And again, I'm not saying I would have stopped, especially
yeah.
considering, I'm going to be hoping that 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 what I said, like maybe this is a character that has no emotions on purpose. But that's a very dangerous thing if you're going to be trying to submit this to the industry.
Yeah.
Because they don't have time. They don't have time to see that unfold. They've got to
Yeah.
make a decision quickly.
All right, story 4. Civilization was the last place one would expect a legend of the wilds to begin, but it was the case for Fern. Being the child of merchants, she spent a lot of time traveling from settlement to settlement, seeing new faces and places all her life. Even though she never stayed in one place for too long, the event she would end up going through was unexpected. It started when she was playing with some of the village children. They had been running around in the fields pretending to be great heroes, out slaying monsters and saving villagers. As they ran, they ended up coming across the old river that bordered the pastures, and not far away rose the mighty trees of the forest. To the girl, the conifers stood like wooden pillars holding up the sky, tall and magnificent. I'm just going to finish the paragraph. Most of the children knew better than to go into the woods because of the predators that lurked there. They were infamous for raiding their livestock and sometimes carried off people as well. Okay. Why are you out where you're out? And where are you out?
All right. So unfortunately, this reads a lot like your 1950s, 60s, 70s fantasy, which was super popular back then. It's very omniscient. It's very telly. I don't see it selling a lot in today's market. So again, we're looking at this from an industry standpoint. They're looking for limited POV. They're looking for, openings that start in media res, in the action. And this is a story that's starting in that traditional, Belgariad,
Yeah.
sort of Shannara, Lord of the Rings kind of way, where we're going to give kind of this overarching backstory and this history of a world and all this stuff. And it's just not exactly what the industry is looking to purchase these days, because readers are more savvy. Readers want to be in the action quicker. And so I was out because of the fact, not because of any of the writing, not because of the story, not because of any of that, but because it's too 1970s. And I just
I
don't
was
think
out.
those sell today.
Yeah. I was out they had been running around in the fields pretending to be great heroes out slaying monsters.
Right.
Just show me that and give me the opportunity to connect to the character rather than tell me that that's what they had been doing. Because if you start the story with they had been doing that, I'm going to assume that that is going to be a whole lot of the rest of your book.
Well, if we continue down just a little bit, so we get an in media res line, get away from there. Mr. Eyesore, the watchman of the fields, called to the children, you're too far from the village, blah, blah, blah. But then we're one by one, the children obey. Like, we're in this omniscient, and omniscient just doesn't sell today. It is harder. So remember, the agent who signs you has then got to take your story and convince somebody with money to buy it. And so as an agent, they know that publishers just, like, you have to wine and dine and convince the crap out of them. This is the most amazing tale. And you're just gonna have to get over it. Yes, it's written in omniscient. I know it's a dead POV, but oh my goodness, this story, it's Lord of the Rings destroying. And they're just not, they don't have time for that. So again, not raising my hand because of the writing story, whatever. Omniscient is just not something that is easy to sell.
Yeah.
And these guys are business people.
They're looking for what sells easy. All right, story 5.
I always think of agents like used car salesmen. They're going to go after the easiest sell that they can do.
Yeah. Story 5. What do you mean Dennis has been chosen for family reassignment? Dad's voice echoed through our flat. The glass of water Mom had brought for our guest fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. I collapsed on the couch with horror. Family reassignment? It couldn't be. That was one of the worst things that could happen to any kid. What had I or my parents done that the government decided to take me away from them? Mr. Wells sighed as he shook his bearded head. If it weren't for his green business suit and tennis shoes, he could have passed as Father Christmas. Exactly that. My connections alerted me that your son was selected to be given a new set of parents. We've dug into his new parents' social media records, and let's just say they wouldn't have his best interests at heart. I shuddered and thought about what I had seen at school. Everyone talked about students who had been reassigned to new parents and had their futures wholly destroyed. Some had been exposed to drugs and alcohol. Some had been forced to work in jobs that left them traumatized. Others were forced to transition against their will, even when they made it clear with their preference that they could be made to fulfill the wishes of those who knew better than them. As a result, many ended up taking their own lives, all because people who had the funds to pay the bribes to politicians wanted to take control of kids' fates. There was no way I was going to let that happen to me. Mr. Wells is there. Please, call me Jules. Mr. Wells is far too stiff. Cleaning his glasses real quick, he continued. Yes, there is something I can do. I'm here to offer you and your parents a chance to travel. Somewhere the government won't be able to find you. I couldn't help but scoff at that. Where? Guardian Shepherd controls most of the planet now, and travel to any nation that stands against them is forbidden. They'll track us down.
Now,
Oh, I don't believe. Yeah. All right. So
um,
I will tell you where I was out. I was out over here
right
at
there.
this paragraph. And I was out because the exposition
Mhm.
was getting way too long
It
and
was.
it wasn't necessary.
It was
I'd
not.
been hit like up front. I got it. I got it. Okay. The
Right.
kid's being reassessed, being taken away from his parents by the government. That's plenty good enough. You don't need to add to that all of the other stuff. Like that can
100%
come later.
agree. 100% agree. I think an agent would have been out there. I didn't raise my hand because I actually was interested and wanted to see where it went.
Yeah.
I was personally interested.
Yeah.
Um, if this was somebody in the writer's room, I would be editing the tar out of them. It's not the
Yes.
best written. It's got way too much info dumpy stuff in it. Like go to the first paragraph just to kind of show you a point of view.
There's one hell of a as you know, Bob
Oh yeah.
dialogue
Yeah, a
going
lot
on.
of that. So all of this needs to be, and if I was an agent, I would go, wow, this is a really good idea, but oh my
Yeah.
God, is it going to take a lot of work to fix? But like as an example, in case the author is listening, we
Yeah.
have this beautiful opening line that is in media res, and the third line is in media res. I collapsed on the couch in horror. But we have this line in the middle, the glass of water mom had brought for our guest fell from her hand. Like, um, the glass of water in mom's hand fell to the floor.
You
Fell.
don't need to introduce the guest at this point. It's okay. We'll get to the
Right,
guest.
exactly. We don't need this
Yeah.
past perfect, had brought, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Because now we're not in media res anymore. And
Yeah.
so like I'm in the moment, keep me in the moment. So I'm gonna edit the tar out of this,
Mm.
but like it's an interesting concept and I personally want to see where it goes, but it's like it's going to be if I'm an agent and I'm
Yeah.
going, wow, there's a lot of editing that's need to happen to this before I actually can show it to a an acquisitions editor. Do I really want to spend that kind of time on it? I mean,
Yeah.
this now becomes this is why the industry sucks so bad because there's nothing but subjectiveness. So as an agent,
Mm.
some agents are going to read this and go, this is a part of that, whatever, you could say that this strays into some of the political stuff going on or whatever, and they're gonna be like, I don't want to have anything to do with this, and they're just gonna reject it on that. Some are gonna be like, okay, I'm actually interested in this, I want to see where it goes, but you know do I want to spend the time to fix it up? And then it becomes my subjectiveness. It becomes
Mm.
me as an agent. Do I like this story enough personally
Yeah.
to take it on to fix it, to try and make
Yeah.
money off of it? Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of times the answer is yes. A lot of times you'll get an agent that will put that money, time and effort into because they actually really like the story.
Yeah.
So that's the
So yeah,
crappy part about this industry.
I think what you need to work on if you're the author of this is stay in media res and cut down on the exposition.
Yeah.
We did not need this info dump here.
No.
We did not need this info dump in dialogue here. Like there's a lot of info dumping going on
Yeah.
here.
Because everyone in that room knows that the guardian shepherds control most of the planet.
Yeah. Everyone knows that.
Now you
So,
can do stuff, so here's the thing about, lines like this. You can do things that are more natural that people actually do say that isn't for the readers. Like this line is for the reader. But, if he says something like, where can anyone go that the guardian shepherd doesn't control? Like,
yeah,
people say that all the time. And then that gives the reader, oh, they control a lot. They control everything because they don't even know where to
that
go.
gives, yeah,
So
that gives the reader exactly what they need to know.
you
Like,
still
done.
have to give information to the reader. You just have to do it in a way that isn't as they control all this. But I'm going to say it anyway, even though you know it, because there is this magical entity reading our story that doesn't know it. And I'm going to give
Yeah.
them that information. So really interesting story. Join a writer's group. Really get other people to kick this around and look at it and help you, improve on the flow of it and some of these other things. And I think you might have a winner here.
Yeah. I think you've definitely got a potential on the page. Just work on your craft.
If you're going to go for now, could this be self-published and be successful? Maybe. Because again, readers are a heck of a lot less. We're not talking about the reading side here. We're not. We're talking about the industry. So just understand that for everybody who has submitted first pages here. If you're trying to get the industry to buy this is going to take a lot of work. Anyone who knows anything, which an agent knows stuff, is going to know that they're going to have to spend a lot of time editing this.
Yeah.
And that's going to take months of time. They're going to have to get personally involved on it. And the only ones that are going to do that is an agent who reads this and goes, I love this story personally. I'm going to spend my time because I want this story out on the market. And those are few and far between.
Yeah, you're going to struggle to get accepted. All right. Story 6. 8 billion people, and yet we were still lonely. So we did what we do best. We worked on developing a tool to solve our problems. But loneliness isn't such an easy problem to solve. It can't be solved with conquest or money or sugar. So we had to be creative. It could only be solved by making even more of us. Thus began humanity's most ambitious project to play God. Yeah, okay. Where are you at? Yeah.
And then I stopped reading and just started looking down, and we're still in,
but it's an exposition. The whole first page is an exposition.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this has nothing to do with the story. The story may be very interesting, but most agents, again, this is one of those pieces that an agent is going to have to fall in love with the story.
Yeah.
Most agents are looking for something that they're going to sell easier, and what sells easier is one character in one head. Not necessarily, I mean, you can have multiple characters. I'm saying in the scene, I'm in one head, and I'm connected to a person. So like, what was the name of
This
that?
reads very literary fiction.
Yeah.
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 A peanut gallery says reads like a prologue. Yes. It reads like a classic 80s sci-fi prologue is what it reads like.
Yeah.
And those were popular. And I'm sorry to do this to you 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is shocking to me that it was 40 years ago, and remains shocking to me, but it has been 40 years.
So
and they're not popular anymore.
I only know of one book that's published in first person plural. Wives of Los Alamos. And while it did sell well, several 100,000 copies, I don't know if it ever crossed 1 million, but it might have. The vast majority of the reviews are negative, and it's all because of second person plural. So it would do stuff like I've memorized kind of the opening of it. We were in our kitchens when our doorbells rang. We wiped our hands on our aprons and went into our living rooms where our husbands sat in their favorite chair. The man at the door was sharply dressed, and our husbands welcomed him inside. We offered him a beverage, but he declined, and he and our husbands went into their offices to discuss.
So I don't think that that is what this author is doing. This author is clearly talking about we, the humanity.
Right, right. No, they're not writing in first person plural. What I'm getting at is, even though an agent was convinced to take that book on, and the publisher who bought it was actually the Brit publisher who published Harry Potter originally, not the one that made a lot of money off of it, but the original publisher before they sold it to Simon & Schuster, whoever I think it was Simon & Schuster they sold it to. But again, the number one thing that people complain about is the way it was written. And that's a shame when the story was actually kind of cool. It's about the wives of the scientists who were secretly taken away to make the atom bomb. And so instead of creating a fictitious character and getting aspects of the individual wives, this author decided to make a plural character that was every wife, all of them in one character, and never stopped. The whole book is written that way, and it is incredibly hard to read.
Yeah.
And so while the story, very interesting, so that's what this reminds me of. And so what an agent's going to have to do is they're going to have to decide, are they going to be able to convince? Because like that is a big deal. I want to sell you a story about from the perspective of the wives of the scientists that invented the nuclear bomb. They were all moved to this secret base, had to develop and move their families there, had to live in secret and all this. It's a very interesting story. And it's based on factual, events. So therefore, I think that's the reason why they were able to sell it. But this is a sci-fi story. So that's why I'm out, is because as an agent, I'm like, there's nothing I can do with this.
Yeah. Okay. Story 7. A raven's cry. That's what told Rurik their lives here were over. The bird's mournful croak reached him while he sighed the row of barley at the field's edge. Looking up through the fog, he glimpsed a cloaked figure among the trees. It wasn't much, a flourish of black and a flash of a pale, vicious face under a hood. That's when he knew they must leave this place. Whatever lies he told himself afterward, in his heart, he knew. That terrible knowledge froze him for an instant, then he shoved it aside. In the wilderness, a stranger was an intruder. He must learn who the figure was and what he wanted. He dropped his scythe and snatched up his sword, which lay nearby as always, and lunged through the golden barley into the trees. Spruce needles crunched underfoot, and branches tore at his beard and tunic as he barreled through the underbrush. The autumn gloom turned to twilight under the trees, and the air was crisp and resinous, tinged with sea salt. He found no one and could see little through the fog that blanketed everything. The woods were silent but for the calls of his fellow workers and the low roar of the sea under the cliffs, and the fog muffled even those. Maybe he had imagined it. Feeling himself hesitate once again, he turned toward the field and called, "To arms!" I'm not sure. I'm might be out. Okay, why are you out?
Again, it goes back to that. It's very omniscient. This is not written in limited. We're not in Rurik's head. We are in a third-party narrator who is narrating Rurik's story, just like Lord of the Rings. And I just see so many agents passing on these just every single time. And so as an agent, I'm going to go, yeah, this is somebody else trying to copy Lord of the Rings. It's not going to, Lord of the Rings would not sell today. If it didn't exist and somebody just took Lord of the Rings exactly the way it's written into an agent, and they've already proved that. They've taken a bunch of books that were massively popular from 50, 100 years ago, changed the names and all of that, submitted them to dozens of publishers, and they were 100% rejected. We don't readers don't consume stories this way anymore. And so many writers fall in love with The Belgariad, you know, by David Eddings. It's great, loved it. But you can't sell The Belgariad anymore.
So I don't have a problem with that, actually. I'm okay with it being in the slightly removed sense, because to me it is still limited enough. It's not close, it's not a close POV. It is somewhat removed, but it doesn't feel like it's omniscient. Okay. So
This
I'm
would probably
okay.
do really well in the as a self-published. But again, what we're doing here is, would an agent buy this?
So why I think an agent might actually be out is because this line where he turns to the field and he calls to arms, I'm like, this does that to me, that threw me out.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, he's going to investigate, but there are people that he could have called to arms. Like, it doesn't, something about it doesn't feel right.
Actually, it was the disconnection between, for me, it was the disconnection between the line right before it. Maybe he'd imagine it. Oh, I might have imagined this. So let me go ahead and cry wolf and get a whole bunch of guards to come and help me with this.
Yes.
What I just think of is an imagination.
Yeah. So he'd imagined it, and then he turns and he calls for the guard. Like, it doesn't, like, that doesn't flow right to me.
But again, that's where the pushback for me happens with why it's omniscient. So if it was limited, we're going to write it in a way to where, did I just see something? Let me go take a look. I might have saw something. I think I saw it. But in this, it was, he saw it. He saw this. This is what it looked like. And this is what it was. And then we get the, maybe he imagined it. Well, that's omniscient, because we know for a fact that he saw it, but we also know for a fact that he's doubting himself, because we're an omniscient narrator. Like,
so
he knows.
Actually, like, if he just cut this line, it would all be limited. This is the only omniscient line.
No, I disagree with that, because even like that he knew, and
Where
the next line, that's when he knew.
lots and lots and lots of authors write with he knew.
Yeah.
Plenty of published authors write with he.
100%.
I do not think that'll throw an agent.
Well, that's why there's two of us doing this.
Yeah.
So why were you out then?
Yeah. So that one I don't think is, because I've seen so many published books with like he knew.
Well, it's not just the new. It's the whole thing. That's when he knew he must leave this place. Whatever lies he told himself afterwards, in his heart, he knew. There's no feeling to that. You're telling me what he's feeling. And that's what omniscient gives you. It gives you this very telly way of describing everything. That's why.
But I still feel you're in his head, because you're not in anybody else's head. You're only in his head.
But he's the focal character, which is what
there's
you
a degree of going forward and so on. No, I wouldn't call this omniscient. I wouldn't call this close. Like, it's not third person close, but I wouldn't call it omniscient. Anyway, it's irrelevant, because this threw me out. Like, these two lines in combination tossed me. So,
but it's also very telly.
Yeah.
So the story may be good. But if I'm an agent, I feel like this is written in omniscient. And so it's the same thing that I said with that other story, where it feels like it's somebody who writes in that old style. And I just don't see a lot of those books hitting the market. Not that they aren't hitting the market.
Yeah, this paragraph as well, like, in the wilderness, a stranger was an intruder. He must learn who the figure was and what it wanted.
Right.
That reads like an info dump.
Right. So the first line you could say is limited.
Yeah.
The fourth line, except for the which lay nearby as always.
Yes, that also threw me out.
Right. Is limited.
But this in the middle is info dumpy, omniscient info dumpy.
Yeah.
So, like, when you're giving information in third person limited, the information must sound as though it comes out of the character's head, as though the character is narrating it. It's
Yeah.
part of the narration of their lives.
The narration should read from the character, how the character sees the world around them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Story 8. She had always hated being outside. Daylight poured in as the doors to the main courtyard opened. Piper half closed her eyes at the rush of freezing cold air. She barely felt the chill. The knot of her stomach was so tight. She clenched her left hand and took a breath. She was in line with half a dozen other people, all of whom started moving into the courtyard once the doors were open. She tugged her furs and woolens closer as she stepped into the cold outdoors. The ice and snow of the courtyard crunched under the group's heavy boots as the comforting enclosure of the tunnels was left behind. She had the walls of the courtyard around her, but the ceiling was gone, open air stretching out to the swirling grey clouds overhead. Piper kept her attention focused on the ground ahead of her. Looking up made her dizzy. All that space just seemed unnatural. It also didn't help that when she looked at the haze, it felt as if it was looking back at her. The town's ogre was standing sentry in its usual place in one corner of the courtyard. The aged machine looked like a squat armored knight standing twice as tall as any man and carrying its grand cannon on one arm like a soldier on march. Piper had seen the thing move maybe 3 times in her lifetime, and it was probably for the best. From the rust-pitted plates covering its body, it was clear the ogre was older than the fort it protected. In any case, it was the day's visitors who did the real work when it came to defending people from the monsters out beyond the walls. In the center of the courtyard, a 5-post tent had been set up. Standing in front of it was a grizzled man with a grey beard and a stern look in his eyes. His shirt bore a torch superimposed over a shield, the mark of the wardens. Piper's pulse quickened at the sight. Years of waiting, fighting through setbacks, and rebuilding herself to get here. Now finally, her day had come. The group lined up in front of the tent. Most of them were around Piper's age, just a year or 2 into adulthood. She recognized them all as neighbors and friends from around town. They exchanged looks ranging from nervous to appraising. The warden's visit was a chance to make something more of yourself if you were willing to risk it. Goes on a little bit, but I think we'll stop there because I
That's
think,
the first page.
yeah, I think suffice to say, we would at least turn the page.
So it needs work.
Yeah.
There's definitely some things to be tightened up, definitely some things to be enhanced, but there was nothing egregious that I think an agent would go, this. So everything we've talked about so far, and I hope I'm not offending the other 7 authors, but everything we've talked about so far are things that we can either go, oh, I assume that this is going to be a problem throughout, and I don't want to take the time to fix it, or, you know, it's just not what I think I can sell. You know, those are the 2 things I think I've said the most. This one, it didn't grab me. So an agent may have rejected it before I stopped. But it's some things that's like, that's not a hard fix. That's not a hard fix. With a little bit of effort, I can, like, if I was an agent, I can go, look, I can actually spend a day or 2 with this author, teach them a few things that are egregious that could be really fixed to take this to another level. And then if the story is good, it's not going to take much effort on my part to get this into a sellable condition.
So, to the author, a great way to make this instantaneously grabbable is if you combine the nervous fear we feel here with the anticipation that she feels, will the warden be there?
Yes.
Because the problem is at the moment, remember we did that tension episode, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 episodes ago, where we spoke about conflicting emotions. This is an ideal place to put conflicting emotions and turn that first paragraph into an instantaneous hook.
Yeah. That's why I said this isn't great, but I don't think this is hard to fix with the right guidance. So I think this is, you know, one, it feels like it's written in limited. It's not overly telly. It's not info dumpy. It doesn't have any of those big red warning signs. that makes
Yeah.
me go, oh, this is just going to be throughout this whole entire thing. It's going to have to take major surgery to cut this stuff out and change this stuff. So it's definitely not, I didn't get to the end and go, I'm buying this. How do I contact this author
Yeah.
to get the rest of this manuscript? But it's definitely, this is one that I would put into the pile of, you know what, I'm going to ask for a few more chapters of this. I'm going to see how much work this is going to take. If it really holds up that it's not going to take that much, I'm going to have a chat with the author and say, hey, if you're willing to work with me a little bit, I want you to do some pretty heavy changes to this. But if you're willing to work with me on this, I think we can get this to a part that we can sell it. And then at that point, this is something we've never talked about. At that point, you also have to understand it's not only a buyer's market on the manuscripts, it's also a buyer's market on authors. So
Yeah.
let's say now I contact this person, I do a Zoom call with them, and I say, look, there's still some things you need to work on. And they're like, how dare you? I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, no, this person's going to be too hard to work with. While the manuscript may be almost there, the person is going to be difficult to work with. So I'm out. So that's another aspect of this is you also have to be easy to work with. So like the guys at Harn World, the number one comment that they keep sending to me as we've been going through the edits of this is like, I can't believe how easy you are to work with. Like, this is so awesome. Like, they're not even talking to me about the story that I wrote. I mean, they are, because whatever. But like one of their big comments were, I just want to thank you so much for how easy you are to work with. You've made my job so much easier. And again, that's how that's a part of this process as well. Not only do you need to be a good writer, but you also need to be good to work with.
Yeah.
So, obviously it could fall apart there. But this is that I think an agent may actually reach out, get a few more chapters, find out if it is, if it goes longer, that it's very workable, then have a meeting with the author. And if they seem workable, sign them.
Yeah.
It's still
All
going to take
right.
work. And so there's still gonna be agents out there that are just used car salesmen that's like, no, don't want to spend that time. Gonna keep looking.
Number 9. If there was frost in the air when a child was born, the old story said to keep the wind locked out from the shutters and spread salt before every door to ward off the foul spirits that descended from the mountains each year. The earth's sleep is fitful. In the cold it stirs to sow its curse, stealing the fiery souls of newborns. It was an old wives' tale to explain away stillbirths. There were no lurking malevolent spirits in the shadows, and a little salt wouldn't stop a curse any more than a please or a thank you could. But I'd taken to carrying around a pot of the stuff anyway. Even at the height of summer, it was all I could do to ward off watching eyes, the prickling stare that seeped through every crack in the windows, creeping down my spine in shivers whenever the wicker left their bone-white tower to collect tithe from the noble houses of Aloyek. Mother scoffed at fairy tales, but even she made certain to pay tithe on a strict schedule, not out of any sense of devotion, mind you, but because a satisfied wicker was one who wouldn't stay long enough to find me and notice I was one of them. I was to stay far away from the door when winter came, no matter the guest, lest they catch my scent on the air and ferry me away to the tower, never to see the light of day again. Some said when wicked children were taken, they were eaten and replaced by clay statues that moved and talked like people, but had nothing left inside. And like clay, wicker could change their shapes, grind up bones, and use them to forge their features to match whatever face you found the most trusting, before stabbing you in the back with claws of the wild beasts. I'm going to stop there. Okay. I was in until we hit this paragraph. Where were you at?
Technically, I was out in the opening paragraph, and then we got to the next paragraph, and it was like, oh, okay, because I was like, we literally just talked about this, about that old 70s style omniscient, but then it's like, oh wait, this is in first person. All right, I'm gonna give it a little time because that's interesting.
Yeah.
But to me, that second paragraph is fantastic.
Yes.
if the first paragraph was written that way and the third and fourth paragraph were written that way, and this is what I mean by that. In this second paragraph, it's all me connecting to the character. And really it could even happen sooner, but because it could happen sooner in that first sentence, but I mean the second sentence. So let's take out the first sentence. It was the old wives' tale to explain away stillbirths, because that is an attachment to the next one. So if it just started off, there were no lurking malevolent spirits in the shadows, and a little salt wouldn't stop a curse any more than a please or a thank you could. But I'd taken to carrying around a pot of the stuff anyway. It's like, okay, well, so you don't believe, but you're doing it. That's interesting. Even in the height of summer, it was all I could do to ward off watching eyes, the prickling stares that seep through every crack and window, creeping down my spine and shivers whenever the wicker left my bone. And like, it's all very visceral and very me and very now and very connective. So we start in this omniscient, and then we come into this visceral, and then the next one is okay. It's not devoid, but then it gets devoid again. And so the writing is good. As far as the grammar and the sentence structure and all of that, this author has a really good grasp of that. But
this went on way too long. This last paragraph, some said when wicked children were taken, they were eaten and replaced by clay statues. Like, one, that sentence is long, but two, this whole paragraph just seems to go on. It's a hell of an info dump.
Yeah. So here's the problem that I have, the big problem. So this last weekend was my weekend to teach, and I was teaching point of view.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about with first person, I think that the number one thing you should try for with first person to really make it shine is it should have a unique voice. And I say, if it starts to read like prose, because first person, in my opinion, shouldn't read like prose. It should read like the character's talking to you. That you're actually connected to this really cool, look at Jim Butcher with the Dresden series. And I'm not going to say the first book was great, but he definitely gets really good as the series goes on in how he writes first person. So I'm not talking about the stories. I'm talking about how his command of first person.
Yeah.
I feel like when it starts sounding like prose, you would be better served to write it in third person, because third person. So when first person is written in something that sounds like prose, it seems very obvious to me. So info dumps and telliness start to really show themselves. In third person, the prose naturally becomes invisible because we're so used to consuming everything in third person in prose. So when it reads like prose, if that's your writing style, one of my recommendations is always you really should think about writing in third person, because third person is supposed to sound prosy. Like, that's kind of the point of it. Even when you're writing in limited, which, my limited, I write exactly like first person, just in third person pronouns. It still kind of feels prosy because third person is supposed to feel that way. When your first person feels prosy, I think that you're just not doing first person.
It's very noticeable in first person.
Right.
Info dumps and talliness becomes super noticeable.
Yeah. Which is why they're noticeable in third person too, because prose doesn't hide info dumps or tells. When you're writing first person in voice, in character voice, you can info dump and tell all you want, and it almost becomes invisible. You should not info dump and tell. I'm not saying to do that.
But it becomes
I'm just
invisible.
saying it becomes invisible.
Because it is infused with the character's voice, and the character's voice is what keeps the reader there.
And it sounds active. It's like you don't even kind of realize that you're just being puked information at, because it's being puked at you in a voice as opposed to prose.
Yeah.
So the author's grasp of grammar in this is fine. The
story's got an interesting element to it.
Very much so. But it's the back and forth between, I'm really in the first person character, I'm not in the first person character. I'm really in the first person, and it's that is going to keep the reader from connecting to it and make it a harder thing to sell.
And that was it. That was our publishing game, our second round of the publishing game. What did you think in the comments? Would you have bought any of these books if you opened them up? and it was the first look inside. Let us know down below. And otherwise,
if you're the
we will
authors,
see you
don't
soon.
hate us too much, please. We're trying
You-
to show you what the industry thinks like, not what we think like. So hopefully it's to give you some things to think about if you're trying to submit to the industry. Again, this is not for submitting to Marie and Drake. This is, and again, we're being general here. Are there agents that are going to be different? Absolutely. 100%. I mean, maybe one of these 9, they're like, I've already signed with an agent. They love my stuff. Great. We're not saying that. We're just giving what we know from the agents that we've had experience with, from what we've seen of publishers, and kind of how those people, we see them thinking. We're not publishers. We're not agents. So we don't have to think that way. So don't hate the messenger is basically what I'm trying to say. We're just trying to give you some advice to help you think differently if you're going to submit to industry. A lot of these books may be very successful with an audience, but you got to understand there's a difference between being successful with a reader and being successful with getting somebody to put money behind it. Those are 2 different animals. So,
and I think that that is a good place which to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
bye.
Good day to our esteemed listeners. I'm Marie Mullaney, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through the nuances of writing and world building. If our podcast has enriched your authorial journey in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing our content with your peers is a powerful way to support our mission and ensure we continue to deliver insightful and valuable episodes. Your engagement is greatly appreciated. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.